Chess friends, how are you? I hope you are doing well. Today, I am going to show you an exciting and brilliant chess game played between me and Berserk. Berserk is a very strong and top chess engine in the world. Currently, it even defeats Leela 0. It is a formidable chess AI. In this game, I employed my g4 opening strategy to launch a heavy attack on the king side against him. I will share the chess strategies and tactics that were played in this game. So let's get started without wasting any time. I started the game with e4. And we have c5 followed by knight to f3. At this position, black has many possible moves to consider. As I always say, they can play the French or the modern variation of Sicilian. The knight can go to its usual squares, or black can choose the g6 move, employing the dragon Sicilian in the game. Alternatively, they can play the a6 b5 move, which is also a viable option. From white's perspective, there are different choices. White can play the open variation of Sicilian, or opt for bishop to b5 after the knight moves to c6. Another option is bishop to c4 and knight to c3, the usual development moves. In our game, we had knight to c6, and at this point, I decided to go with d4. The open variation of Sicilian. Some of you might be tempted to play bishop to b5, meeting the knight to d4 move, which seems viable. However, after capture, there would be a threat on the d4 square, requiring a response like pawn to c3 to neutralize it. By playing pawn to c3 and responding to knight to f6 with pawn push, and after knight d5 captures and queen b6 attacking the pawn and bishop simultaneously, I will respond with queen to a4 to protect both. Then a6 might occur, followed by the bishop moving back to e2 and the knight coming to f4, attacking both the bishop and the pawn on g2. You cannot play bishop to f3 right away to protect the pawn because knight to d3 would come, forcing your king to move. This could lead to a potential game continuation. However, in our actual game, I didn't play the bishop to b5 move. I opt for the modern approach. Because I am the god of chess, I employ the open variation of Sicilian by advancing my pawn to d4. Black then has two main options, either pawn to d6 or pawn to e5. However, both moves are ineffective as I can maneuver my knight to b5 followed by pawn to c4, knight to c3. This demonstrates the ruthless efficiency of Berserk as an engine. Being a strong engine, it chooses pawn to e6, aiming to reserve the d5 square for knight entry while activating the dark square bishop. Upon playing knight to c3, black promptly follows with pawn to d6. Establishing a strong center with connected pawns, this hinders a heavy attack in that area. However, being the god of chess, I decide to initiate a forceful attack by advancing my pawn to g4. This move exerts strong control and opens up possibilities, including pushing both g and h pawns and utilizing the dark square bishop's influence. There's also potential for pawn to a4, especially in variations after a long castle. This strategy creates complications for black. Surpassing even Magnus Carlsen's abilities due to my superior ratings, any normal move, such as queen to c7, would be met with my bishop's response. If black attempts a6 to prevent my knight from entering b5, I can maneuver my queen and knight strategically. Can you guess the move? It's knight to b5, an incredible and astonishing move. This knight, along with the queen, directly targets the d6 pawn. Even if black captures the knight, I can easily recapture with the pawn on b5, simultaneously attacking the queen. Your queen is under threat from my knight, and regardless of your move, whether you opt for queen to d7 or retreat to b8, I can easily capture the pawn on d6, forcing your king to move to d8. Following that, I can swiftly capture on f7, delivering a double check to your king and rook, allowing me to regain lost material. If you dare to pin my queen to the king with queen to a5, I can launch a strong and strategic attack, potentially causing chaos reminiscent of a black hole in the universe. Knight takes b6 delivers a check to your king, and after the king moves, knight takes b7 arrives, forking your queen and king simultaneously, a move that also results in a discovered check, leading to the conclusion of your king and queen's love story. Returning to the position, queen to c7 is not a viable move. Any ordinary move would be a waste, as I can play bishop to d3 followed by castling lon on the queen side. This setup allows me to advance my pawns to a4 and h4, setting the stage for a powerful attack on the king side, leveraging my positional advantages. As the knight retreats to e7, my knight moves back to b3. My strategy now revolves around placing my bishop on e3 and executing a long castle. This formation allows my two knights on the queenside to create a formidable presence, dominating both the queenside and the center, especially in conjunction with the dark square bishop. Consequently, black must develop their two bishops from this constrained center structure, as these bishops are currently hindered and unable to facilitate castling for the black king. Once a6 is played, it fortifies the b5 square, thwarting any potential attacks from my end. When Berserk played a6, it also created a weakness on the b6 square, allowing my knight to potentially go to a4, followed by knight to b6 with support from the bishop on e3, causing substantial damage and domination on your queenside. This led me to initiate with pawn to a4 first. After b6 and bishop to e3 in the game, he promptly played knight to b4. His idea was that with my pawn advanced, it couldn't retreat to a3 to dislodge the knight, hence, the knight gained a strong outpost, and he aimed to free his pieces by playing knight to c6, developing the open and dark square bishops, followed by castling. This reflects his strategy, because he is the lover of freedom. A few moves later, I decided to attack the kingside directly with pawn to h4. Some may argue that playing bishop to e7 and castling is preferable, but playing queen to c7, followed by bishop to d7 and long castling, allows me to fortify the kingside and center with pawn to f4. Even if you dare to castle long, I can counter with queen to f2, mounting a strong attack on the b6 pawn, rendering your position weak after my long castle. That's my strategy. So, in this position, black chose bishop to e7, and as my pawn advanced to h5, it showed the rapid progress of my pawns, akin to bullet trains, heading swiftly toward their destination. This reflects my mathematical precision, where I always strive for perfection. Berserk, instead of long castling, opted for short castling, a move some human players might perceive as a mistake, but it isn't necessarily one. As I often say, the human brain isn't designed for chess, it excels at simpler games like Ludo, where 2 + 2 = 4. Chess, being an authentic and intellectual game, requires a level of strategic depth that exceeds human capacity. While humans may process moves 1 or 2 steps ahead, computers like Berserk and Dragon Chess can analyze thousands of moves per second. This highlights the vast difference between AI and human capabilities. However, my videos don't label humans as losers, they simply portray the truth about life and its complexities. But don't be upset, let me inspire you by sharing a life lesson quote. Work for work's sake, not for yourself. Act but do not be attached to your actions. Be in the world, but not of it. To illustrate, consider my move pawn to g5, a strategic choice to launch a robust kingside attack. Berserk responds with rook to b8, indicating a plan to push the b5 pawn. In response, some may consider pushing h6 directly, but that can be countered by black blocking the attack with g6, limiting your pawn's reach and hindering your attack plans. Black can then proceed with b5, setting up attacks with bishop to b7 and rook to a8, taking control of the game. Playing pawn to d5 can further solidify black's position and block your attacks effectively. Thus, in this position, I opt to start with a long castle, setting the stage for a strategic and controlled approach. Black swiftly strikes in the queenside with pawn to b5, aiming to open up the b2 file. Alternatively, some might consider queen to c7, but it's an ineffective move as I can advance my pawn to g6, launching an attack on those pawns. Capturing the g6 pawn immediately will expose the file for my rook. Others might make questionable moves like pawn to h6, reflecting 69 IQ or understanding. In response, I could sacrifice my bishop on h6, leading to a powerful checkmate threat with queen to h7 check. Alternatively, queen takes g6 could force the king to move and open up opportunities for a decisive attack with rook g1 check, leading to a favorable position for me. In reality, black didn't make such low-rated moves like you, because they are a chess engine, not a subpar player. They opted for b5, setting up exchanges that eventually left the b5 pawn unguarded. However, capturing it directly isn't advisable due to bishop to a6, reducing attacking chances in the kingside. Rook to a8 and queen to a5 could follow, capitalizing on the open a file and establishing control. Returning to the position, I started with king to b1 to secure the king's position. Berserk, being a formidable and a cruel chess heir who killed many chess engines, started with bishop to d7. In response, I played pawn to f4, anticipating potential moves like f5, g6, or h6 based on the circumstances to break his ego, and slap on his bladed head, so I choose to initiate with pawn to f5. You can see how it disrupts your pawn structure immediately. Some might consider moves like queen to a8, which would be a mistake, as I could advance my pawn to f6, creating pressure that's hard to defend against. After captures and bishop captures, rook to g1 check forces your king to move, leading to bishop to h6 and putting significant pressure on your position. This situation could yield a substantial advantage for me. Instead of such moves, Berserk, being a top chess engine, chose to capture the pawn on f5, attempting to limit my attacking chances. However, this move weakens control over the d5 square. I countered with an attack by pushing my pawn to h6, if you recapture the pawn immediately, I can swiftly position my queen on h2, launching a devastating attack on the h-file. Another possibility is rook takes h6, creating more threats. If you try to defend with pawn to f6, protecting with your rook or queen, I can respond with queen to f2, targeting the h7 pawn. As your rook moves to f7, I can push my pawn to g6, creating vulnerabilities around your king side. My pawn is putting pressure on your rook. And your pawn on h7 is also targeted. However, you can't capture my pawn immediately due to rook to h8 check. If you play normal moves like rook to g7, I can capture your pawn with my rook, threatening to take your rook on g7 with my queen arriving at h7, setting up a potential checkmate. Another move that leads to checkmate is rook to h8, securing the win of the black queen. Your defeat is imminent. So let me tell you a beautiful quote for this purpose. Be thankful for what you are now, and keep fighting for what you want to be tomorrow. Returning to the position, g takes h6 is a risky move, so Berserk opted to block the attack by pushing the pawn to g6, fortifying the structure. By playing rook to e8 and bishop to f8, black aims to protect the black king. However, I have another strategy in mind. When one avenue of attack is blocked, it's essential to shift focus to the other side of the board to exploit weaknesses. In this position, I can start with knight takes b5, gaining a pawn and threatening the pawn on d6. Black might consider moves like queen to b8 or bishop to e6, but both are ineffective as I can counter with queen to c3, advancing my queen to g7 for an air attack. f6 would block it, and after bishop to c5, I can attack both the d6 pawn and the knight on d4 simultaneously. Black might have to play pawn to d5 to protect the knight, but I can execute a strong attack by capturing the bishop and subsequently the pawn on d5. After exchanges, I can capture your knight on c6, leaving me with two connected passed pawns and a winning position. As the game progresses, I have gained a substantial advantage with two minor pieces against your group. Returning to the current position, knight takes d6 is on the horizon. However, black played an incredible move that took me by surprise, and also, you cannot imagine that move in your whole life. The move is, knight takes c2. This cunning sacrifice gains a tempo, as my queen is not positioned on c3 to threaten a checkmate on g7. Black seizes the opportunity to play queen to b8, forcing my rook and queen to defend along the b file, with my queen unable to create a counterplay on c3. Due to the knight's blockade on e5, I opted for bishop to f4, targeting the d6 pawn, but black's knight swiftly moves to e5, blocking the queen's diagonal. Undeterred, I execute a higher plan with knight to c5, attacking both the rook and bishop simultaneously. Black captures the c5 knight, allowing my queen to advance to c3, putting pressure on the vulnerable knight on e5. Black might consider f6 to protect the knight, but it would only weaken their position significantly. This position heavily favors me, allowing for a decisive heavenly attack starting with bishop to c4. When the pawn advances to f6, the bishop delivers a thunderbolt check on the king. Following the king's move and subsequent captures, rook to d6 can quickly join the fray, attacking the bishop on f6. After capturing the bishop, I regain control by capturing the knight on e5, threatening both the queen and the rook. You might consider knight to g4 to defend the bishop, but I can simply capture it on f6, putting your queen and rook in jeopardy. This creates a losing position for you. With discovered attacks on your queen on c3 and the black king, f6 is not a viable move due to the strong pressure from my pieces. After black captures the piece on b5, my capture on e5 threatens the queen on b8, moving the queen to e8 to defend leads to my bishop to d6, attacking the dark square bishop and threatening checkmate on g7. The queen must then move to e8 to defend the dark square bishop. Subsequently, bishop to g2 and rook to d6 create a cunning sequence, putting pressure on your queen. After your bishop captures my rook, I threaten checkmate on g7 after capturing with my bishop, and after captures on f8 and d6, I regain control and continue to apply pressure on the board. This position is in my favor, especially after capturing the pawn on f5. I follow up by sacrificing my bishop on g2 and then capturing on f6, creating a situation where blocking the check with the rook isn't viable due to queen to h8 check, followed by king e7 and rook to e8, creating vulnerability for the king. After the king moves to e8 and subsequent moves involving checks, I regain the bishop on e2. The game progresses with a queen exchange offer from your side, leading to a situation where both pawns are under attack, making it impossible to save one of them. As I capture the f4 pawn and gain connected pawns, the game becomes completely winning for me. If black captures the h6 pawn, I execute a strategic plan by promoting to a new queen, setting up a checkmate. This has been a wonderful game, and if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to my channel. Wishing you all the best. Goodbye and see you next time.